Wonderful, really great. Thank you very much. And reminding everyone on this thematic session 2 that you can send your questions on Swap Card, and you can also network via Swap Card. It's really great. You probably all being tech oriented, I don't have to hold your hand on that. But do keep in mind the hashtag EU Open Data Days, EU Open Data Days, if you want to put something out there on the social networks, and please do cast it wider. So next presentation is about a supply-driven, from a supply-driven towards a more demand-driven open data policy in the city of Ghent. And to explain that to us is Joran Van Daele, who's the open data manager for the city of Ghent. Joran, I'll just pass it to you, please. Are you with us, Joran? Hello, hello. If Joran is not.
Okay, here I am.
Else, there you are. You're with us? Okay, Joran. Great. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Passing the ball to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Joran Van Daele. I work for the city of Ghent. I'm here as an open data manager for the city, so I will talk about how we do open data in our little city, Belgium. Share this. Okay, so first of all, for the people who don't know where Ghent is actually, Ghent is the second biggest city in Flanders in Belgium. We have around 270,000 citizens.
I highly recommend it. It's a cool town. It's a university town. Very cool. It's not far from Bruges, but you really should check it out. It's less touristy and it's beautiful. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for promoting our city. We're actually the biggest student city. Like you said, we have a university. We have around 76,000 students, which is quite a lot if you see the total number of citizens, of course. We have also a big harbor in our city, and we are well known for our Ghent Festival. It's like a 10-day festival when there's no corona, of course. And we had our Ghent Light Festival 2 weeks ago, which had around 800,000 visitors in 5 days. And we also have a lot of cultural history. We have the Belfry, Van Eyck, Gravesteen, and so on. But I will stop promoting my city in a touristical way. So why I'm here, I will talk about our open data story, the why of open data, the shift from supply-driven towards demand-driven open data, and I will give some examples of how we do open data in Ghent. First of all, the why. It's quite logical for us because there is a law and we have coalition agreements. We have our Decreet Hergebruik van Overheidsinformatie, it's called. It's actually a translation or a Flemish translation of the PSI directive, Directive on the Reuse of Public Sector Information. In our translation, we actually say that our governance documents should be open, machine readable, and under an open license. With machine readable, we mean like not an Excel file, because an Excel file is not open, so you have actually need in CSV file, for example. Also interesting is that we highly emphasize the reuse. We want to emphasize the commercial and the non-commercial part, also commercial, which is quite interesting for us. And we have a coalition agreement. So Ghent is governed by different parties, and those different parties actually agreed on making a coalition agreement in which they stated that we wanted to be a data-driven city that actually works on open data. Next to this, we have policy notes. Policy notes in Belgium are like things that you want to accomplish within a certain legislation. And in this policy note, we actually had a more dedicated focus on open data. There was the principle of open by default was actually mentioned in this nota only once, and we also mentioned the Open Data Charter. Also, if you just do Control F, you can actually find the word open data 26 times in that document, which is also very nice if you just count it up. The Open Data Charter, Open Data Charter is something that we made together with Smart Flanders. We made it together with 13 other cities in Flanders, and it was actually focused on real-time open data and shared standards. Our Open Data Charter is like a list of 20 principles, which each city that actually signed the document should actually follow. And I will not say every 20, all the principles, but I will just highlight the first 3. The first one, actually quite logical, open by default. Every data set that is captured by the city should be open by default. But of course, if it's not open because of GDPR or other reasons, we should actually give a reason why it's not open, and we should explain it. That's the second rule, comply or explain. And the third basic rule is only once. We should only collect it once, and it should be published as close to the source as possible. So keep in mind that this document is signed by our mayor a few years ago. So it's always interesting for me to use this when I'm going to other city servants. And of course, we have other core values of open data. Of course, we want to be a transparent, open, and innovative city. In my opinion, the data comes from the citizens, and we should actually give it back to the citizens. That's why, in my opinion, we should always keep it free. Because if open data is closed by a money wall, is it open data? It's just a question I have. In my opinion, it's not open data. We should also stimulate innovation and the reuse of open data. Why should we pay money to make applications or dashboards and so on? Why other people can make that dashboard or other thing for you? And last but not least, we can actually share experience and thoughts with other cities, because open data is a global value with other, and we can actually share quite easily ideas, thoughts, and so on. So it's quite handy for me to communicate with other cities as well. But then, so we clearly know that there's a need for open data, but we started actually way back. In 2010, we started with the first hackathon. We organized Apps for Ghent. It was a city hackathon. And we needed some data sets, because otherwise you could do nothing at all. So we needed some open data sets, but there were some files on a USB file. It was not a real open data portal and so on. So after that first hackathon, it was very popular. So we noticed that we started actually a tradition of a yearly hackathon. We started shifting towards thematic hackathons, more site events, and so on. But we also start actually seeing a clear need to collect and centralize open data on a website, sort of portal. So we actually worked very hard on our first portal. And what we wanted, it's actually the question, what do we want from a portal? We wanted like to collect static data sets, basic APIs, GIS data from our Geo server. And we wanted a nice front end in which actually users could see like, oh, I can use this or this or this. And actually, we made it ourselves, our back office. So the back end is called Data Tank. So actually like a big server in which we could store our data. And our front end looked like this. It's not very sexy at this time, but it was something, and it worked. Problem was, it was nice while it lasted. We used it over like 10 years, but there were limits. Data formats were becoming more complex. The amount of volume became bigger and bigger. So every type of data was possible with the data tank. So it became very hard for us to actually manage the data. Also, the front end, as you saw a few slides ago, was not very user-friendly. There was, for example, only one possible export format and so on. So we needed a new portal, and we actually wanted to shift from managing data toward managing user expectations. So we went to our demand-driven open data strategy. So how could we do that? We searched for a new portal. There are different options, like I think many people here know that you have, for example, Secon for a portal, Dacom. They all had differences and problems with them, so it was not easy for us. When we met Datasoft, we saw demos of them and so on, so we quite easily went with them. It's not open source, but if you went open source, it would cost a lot of money, a lot of time, and it was not the right time to do that. We wanted a new open data portal very quickly. So we went with Datasoft, which we actually launched 2 years ago. It's almost 2 years ago. It was right before the pandemic, as you can see. It was like the last event with a lot of people without passes and so on. And we also got some press coverage and so on. So it's very nice. And actually now, if you go to our portal, data.stat.gent, you can actually see our data portal, which is still up and running, of course. It's over 140 data sets at this time. So it's actually quite working well. And yeah, this is some of the advantages. We have API modules, for example. It's easier for people to contact us. There are better right management. We can actually give other civil servants within the city the rights to publish their own open data. We can actually have more numbers, analytics on the use of open data, which is very handy for us to prove our points towards our policymakers. If you can say this open data is used this many times, it will actually help to tell the story. And of course, we have an automatic data flow. Every data set that comes to our portal goes to the Flemish data portal, then goes to the Belgian data portal, and then goes to the European data portal. It's like the advantage of being Belgium. We have like an extra layer in between. I don't know if it's an advantage, but it's just something that we have. So I think it's very clear that we actually shifted from just publishing open data that we have, and it's quite easy to publish, to actually go to a more contact-driven and demand-driven data portal. Actually, people can actually request open data sets. For example, there was a request for having locations of the trees in Ghent. So we actually started working on that to get that as open data. Also, when a data set scheme is changed, we give notifications, for example. people can register their reuse, and there's a heavy emphasis on communication. There's a really heavy emphasis, which I will show in my examples, which I will close my session with. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, we had our Light Festival. This is an image from our Light Festival 2 weeks ago. And you can imagine there are over 800,000 people coming to our city. They all need like a parking spot somewhere, or with their car, with their bike, whatever. So we actually made like a dashboard by using our open data, in which people can actually use this dashboard to find a parking spot for their bike or for their car in real time on a map and in this very clear table. I think in my old slides, there was like an infographic of how many people use it, but there are over, I think, 50,000 people that actually use that dashboard. So that's quite a lot for us and for open data as well. But also some more educational stuff. We have, for example, an open data set of smart garbage collection. So when people see street litter, they can actually report it to us and we come to collect it. And a company actually made like a very deep analysis of how fast we are and so on. But maybe the most fun example, which I will close my session, this is not a Photoshop picture, by the way, it's a real sheep actually in our city center. So to give the context, instead of using like lawnmowers, we actually use sheep to actually mow our grass. It's more eco-friendly, it's easier to do and so on. But they are very popular in the city. So one day somebody within the city actually asked the question, could we add like a tracker to one of those sheep so we can follow them in real time? So that's what we did, of course. And there was like an open data set on which you could actually follow the sheep location in real time. And actually we create a lot of buzz around it, and people start to reuse that open data set. It was like a guy creating his own game, actually imported the API. So in his game, you could see the sheep, and people were making their own maps. Like this is a children-made map with studies to see, but were like sheep drawn by little children on the map, for example. We also started to communicate a lot about it. We used Twitter, Facebook, our city account actually started to reposting it, and we got actually a lot of buzz actually for this. So actually, I think this actually proves certain points. I think communicating is very essential for this. It may sound a bit stupid and silly, but I think this proves the point of open data. It's very easy to understand, and people start to understand that open data could be. And also to actually close my session here, I think that's my opinion, that people will only use open data if you start communicating about it, because otherwise they don't know that it is available. You have to clearly say this is available, you can do this with it and this with it, and they will start using it themselves. But if they don't know that there is open data, they won't use open data. So that's my closing comment on that. So I will thank you, everyone. And if there are questions.
Indeed, Joran, thank you. Well, that's really great. And I think to make it even more enticing is to use really interesting and kind of fun things like sheep, like Light Festival, and practical stuff like the parking. You get 50,000 people inquiring on that in a town like Ghent. That's really great. I've got two quick questions for you. One from Mohit Kapoor: how do you encourage stakeholders and professionals to use the open data portal? Do you build their capacities?
Well, we actually let them be free in our use of open data, so we don't actually give limitations or so on. We actually stimulate them to register to our open data portal so that we know who they are, because otherwise you don't know who is using our open data. So actually stimulate them to do that so that we know that they are using it. But otherwise, from that, we just leave them be. We don't very go in interaction with companies that much. We actually want them just to have like the open data available. If they want to use it, they can use it. If they don't want to use it, they don't have to use it.
Yeah, I think probably what helps too is to try to get media traction on it. If you can get local reports, print, online TV, that kind of gets people to sit up even on the policymaking side, right?
That's true.
Another question here from Rafał Suboc. Will presentations be available later? I am currently using a phone, so Rafał can't see it so well. I guess they will be, right? I forgot whether that will be. Maybe I can be reminded of that by the organizers. I would hope that people can see these presentations on their own time. And another anonymous question is, can users only request access to data or also request improvements of the data? quality, technical availability? And if so, how do you go about deciding between often costly improvements of data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's actually true. People can ask anything to us. We have like a contact form, and they can ask anything to us. So if there are indeed like technical improvements, we have to look with the parties that are involved, technical parties and so on, if indeed it's easy to implement or to change. But it's not easy. It depends from case to case. When it's easy to change, or it's just something that's already up ahead, we change it. But if it's very difficult, we indeed have to decline sometimes the question. It's not easy because open data is still a difficult matter. You don't get money in return for offering our open data, so it's always a bit tricky. There.
Sure. Yeah. I get the word from the organizers that the presentations will be published online, and there will also be a recording of the sessions. So that's